In my last video in this two-part video series, I shared with you my response to what I considered to be the most eloquent yet heartbreaking comment. In this first post, the commenter expressed their frustration at the seeming evil of this world and the inability of people like myself, speakers of supposed truth, supposed somewhat enlightened types like myself, as it were, to find a solution to this human problem. I did reply to this commenter, and you will find that reply in part 1 of this video series, which I will link in the video description below. After my comments, this person responded to me with more questions, and more eloquently written legitimate frustrations about the state of the world for those that still do not know, have yet to discover, the techniques and knowledge needed to deal with this three-dimensional cage. The commenter, in this new post, expressed frustration at the human condition and quoted the line from my response, which in some ways expressed his own frustrations in this regard, this line being, "I am human, and I am bound by the laws of this dimension and humanity as we all are." This person went on to make the case that unlike goodness, which recognizes limits in order to prevent the harming of life, evil has no such limits. And this is a direct quote from this person's comment. The commenter also expressed their own desire to want to be free, and their own search for ways to do this, which unfortunately led this person to individuals that do not have the answers that he was seeking, and instead provided such, at least in my opinion, terrible advice such as, "You can't beat the system," and other such nonsense created by those that will not fight for their right to be free. In this video then, I share my second response, where I state the deep nature of my own desire to fight the three-dimensional cage, and provide a general outline of how it is that people that I referred to as inner alchemists engage in that fight, in that challenge. My response was as follows. Let me start then by saying that you are quite simply a fighter. Inner alchemists also need to be fighters. They are not people that like the system, they are not people that agree, or have ever agreed to the fact that they must be penned animals trapped in a cage. Indeed, the crux of my teaching is how to exit the cage. As such, it is my hope that you do not mistake my words for complacency. I will continue by saying that there is indeed balance even though it is hard to see, especially when seen from the quote-unquote Western perspective. And let me add to that, modern, Western perspective, which tends to weigh everything towards the side of objective, that is materialistic, and simplistic, meaning Newtonian, that is classical logic, which in essence tends to posit that profit is the major essence of existence for humans, and therefore everything else, and that most things function in a physically visual and highly simplistic idea of cause and effect. But there are inner ways, and inner dimensions, inner worlds, where the thrust of existence finds its origin, and such a thrust, which at times can be overpowering, dare I say seemingly violent from such a simplistic perspective, as the one I mention above, is responsible for human existence, which is in and of itself a miracle. And let me say right off, if such a balance as the one I speak of did not exist, believe me, simplistic ideas of Darwinian evolution would not be possible, as humanity is not the strong ruling class of supreme beingness that it imagines itself to be. Quite simply then, without that powerfully violent thrust towards goodness that comes from an inner source, our existence would not be possible, and this world would be a cataclysm, a void devoid of all the beauty that you can see when you look at the most majestic aspects of nature, of natural places. Life is a balance, too high you drown, too low, same thing. We live in heaven, we can't see it, but we live in heaven, how odd that. But then came the archon, and we lost that touch, that sight of nature. And for the first time, we found ourselves in a cage. And I hate that cage. I hate every square inch of that cube. I have written of the cage extensively therefore, and many have called me very dark, and cynical for it might I add. As to why my seeming optimism then, my seemingly perhaps almost PC flair, in my earlier response. While it may seem that way, the reality is that I too am a fighter. I never agreed to the dictum, "You can't beat the system." I say, to Hades with anyone who tells me this is so. But that does not preclude the fact that, as I said, I am a human, and I am bound by the laws of this dimension as we all are. That is what makes it a school, a forge. I am stuck here, for now, to some extent, far less so than most others as my cage is far larger than many, but I am stuck here to some extent still, and I can therefore either sit around and live like most of the people I see, or I can fight. I love the fight, and I therefore love the forge. Another odd contradiction. I hate the cube, but I love the forge. How perfectly sorcerous. I am a fighter, and this is my fight. I was set down in a place I didn't agree to, at least not consciously, not as the individual, the ghost in the machine individuality that I am now. If you have my book, The Way of the Projectionist, then you will understand what I mean by this term, ghost in the machine. I therefore fight. I fight every day, for every breath, without ever believing that I can escape this prison completely, wholly, and therefore cognizant of the fact that I will most likely die a regular death, just like anyone else, because I will not be able to break the life and death cycle that I am currently a part of. But being a fighter means that I won't give up, that I have made great gains already, and that I am ready for more. So as a fighter, I too did quest for knowledge, and through such questing, which eventually grew into an overpowering desire for true freedom, for complete freedom, I became an inner alchemist, which is one of the many ways of those that would fight, truly fight. Now, this desperation, this need, that when properly focused turns into a finely honed desire, created the fire within me, that brought forth my connection to the way, and in accordance with this way, I have done my best, as part of my challenge, to outline in detail in the most immaculate and perfect manner possible, the way of that fighting way. And these books, and all of this material that I have put together, have one particular goal or intent, and that is to beat the system, beat the world as humanity sees it, to escape the cage, to break the cube. I'm not saying that my books are perfect when I say that I aim for perfection, only that I did what I feel is my very best in trying to put them together. And as I said, they are books designed to show all who are interested how to escape the cage. How do you beat the system then? How do you escape the prison without walls? Relatively easy answer, but an arduous and lifelong process, that nevertheless starts, and is maintained with the focus of attention in the right direction, which I described above, as the ability to turn desperation into properly focused and honed desire. In other words, the focus of attention on that which you want or want to do, creates motion and direction, and that direction, slowly but surely, takes us sometimes painfully slowly but unerringly as long as the focus of our attention is precise and continuous, through the walls of the cage, and into bigger and bigger worlds. So that, as I have said before, the only difference between people, the only difference between an inner alchemist and an average person, for example, is the size of their cage. But it is only the inner alchemist, or the knower of one of the many inner ways, that has any chance of finding a world, a collection of worlds therefore, that seems so large as to have no walls. So the answer then is, you break the cage by becoming a projectionist, a master projectionist, which is the true consummate technique of inner alchemists. I have laid out, as I said in the best way that I possibly could, how to do that in the books, the Magnum Opus, and the Way of the Projectionist. And prior to that, while focusing on the fundamental principles, and the underlying core of inner alchemy, in previous books I have given ways to survive the cage, to create allies and servitors, for example, until the energy, and the skills required are attained by those that will try to fight the walls. So my counsel to you, if you will allow me such a thing, is that you read those books, thank you very much for getting them by the way, and that you use those techniques, that you use that singular desire that you now have, to keep at it and keep focusing your attention on the techniques mentioned in those books, or other sources that you feel show you efficient techniques in this regard. And this journey may be hard at times, and incredibly pleasurable in others, but always it will require your unrelenting focus, until you master the skills that I mention in the books above, until you become a master projectionist yourself. When you can do that, to whatever degree actually, even if it is to enter the first room of the projectionist, then you will have beaten the cage to a great extent. You will have made your cage a little bigger than the cage of the person next to you, if such a person does not know of the way. And in time, little by little, your cage will grow to the point that there will be no more walls for you to see, at least not easily. Yes, your body will still be anchored to this earth perhaps, but it will not need so much. It will satisfy much of what it needs in other dimensions. And in time even that physical body that anchors you into this dimension, which at that point by the way you may grow to love, will fade away, and at that point true freedom will truly be yours. Whatever mastery that you can attain as a projectionist, or as a creator of servitors, and other manifestations will be a step forward, and a step towards freedom. And those that can see even a little, they will know that you have made a crack in the walls of the cage, the one that you think is so insurmountable now, and they may suspect then, that you are a follower of the way of the quintessential fighter, and that for you there is no end to your fight, to the search for greater and greater freedom. This was the end of my response, and again, I hope that my response was clear enough, and that my answers provided a modicum of direction and power to help this fighter along. It is my hope that for this commenter, and for all those that stumble across my books, my words, I can at least provide hope and a direction for their future travel. Thank you.